Hello, and welcome to the teacher seminar on question number 13 of our study guide. This is question 13 after the crash, the New Deal. We're going to read a few pages in the study guide and answer the questions. I'll list two ways the New Deal expanded government, and that'll be in the orange section, the section that we read first. Then explain the job or purpose of each New Deal administration. That'll be in the larger section that we read on the pages. And then we'll read the Indian New Deal, which is the other orange section, and that'll answer that last question about the rights that the Indian New Deal gave to Native American groups. All right, so let's get started. Okay, the New Deal. The New Deal was an experiment. No one really knew how to end the Great Depression. President Roosevelt and his advisors based their ideas on the progressive view that government could and should improve economic conditions for all Americans. Though the New Deal failed to end the Great Depression, it did provide work and welfare for the unemployed. The New Deal also greatly enlarged the federal government. For example, government began to regulate or make rules for banks and the stock market. It also began programs that assisted farmers and unemployed workers. These programs were designed to increase the well-being of the people. Many Americans loved Roosevelt. Many others disliked him. Generally, public opinion divided among class lines. Those hit hardest by the Depression, especially farmers and laborers, helped elect him to a record 4 terms. The wealthy, including bankers and big business leaders, often accused him of making government larger and more expensive. They believed the New Deal would hurt the American economic system. Today, people still debate how involved government should be in their lives. All right, so to answer that first question, we're going to look back here at the examples, okay? All right, for example, government began to regulate or make rules for banks in the stock market. That's example number 1. Example number 2 is it also began programs that assisted farmers and unemployed workers. All right, let's get into the larger section now where we're going to look at those 3 programs and answer what they did. After the crash, the New Deal. The New Deal sounded like good news to rural people such as the Tosos of Otter Tail County. By 1932, the Great Depression had driven prices from farm products lower than they had ever been during the darkest days of the 1920s. It looked like the state's farm economy was on the verge of collapse. Families throughout rural Minnesota were frightened. They hoped that help would come soon. In 1933, the federal agency called the Agricultural Adjustment Administration started a program to raise prices for farm goods. This would provide relief to farmers. President Roosevelt went on the radio to explain how the AAA would work. Many farmers, including Conrad and Elizabeth Toso, were skeptical at first. He promised us that he would give everybody work, Conrad recalled. And of course that puzzled us. We wondered how he could do that. The Toso questions were answered the following year when drought struck a large part of Minnesota, including Otter Tail County. Fields dried up from lack of rain. Farmers could not find enough feed to keep their dairy cows alive. Conrad Toso, for example, resorted to feeding his cows Russian thistle. A plant was hard for animals to digest. Then the federal government stepped in. The AAA offered to buy any cattle the farmers in Otter Tail County could not afford to keep. The Toso sold 6 of their 10 cows for $20 apiece. The money they received from the New Deal program helped get them through the summer. Right, so the AAA, their purpose was to help farmers, okay, by raising the price of farm goods. And they also bought livestock when farmers could not afford to feed them. Okay, so they gave relief to farmers by raising the prices of farm goods and by purchasing livestock when farmers couldn't afford them. All right. More help on the way. In 1939, drought struck again, and another federal agency came to the rescue. The Works Progress Administration, or the WPA, provided money to put people to work. It paid for public projects such as repairing schools, improving roads, and building new ball fields. In Otter Tail County, drought-stricken farmers worked on WPA road projects and received livestock feed and crop seeds as payment. It was hard work. hacking through brush to clear way for new roads. But Conrad Toso was happy to do it. There were no jobs to get whatsoever, he recalled. It was the only thing you could do. Here's a picture of what they were doing, okay? You can see just hacking through the road to make a room for a new road. Doesn't look like much fun at all. All right, so the WPA guys, they provided money to put people to work on public projects. So they would help repair schools. They would help build new bridges, new roads, new public buildings, things like that. Of all the government agencies, none was more popular in rural Minnesota than the Rural Electrification Administration, or the REA. In the 1930s, most Minnesotan farms had no electricity. The REA set out to change that. It encouraged farmers to join together to form cooperatives, associations that would help them to set up electricity. Then the REA funneled money to these organized groups. This money was used to provide low-cost loans to farmers who wanted to bring electricity to their farms. The cooperatives brought electricity from existing power plants and then built power lines to carry electricity to these farms. In 1939, about 800 farmers in Otter Tail County were enjoying the benefits of the REA, but Conrad and Elizabeth Tosa were not among them. "We didn't have the cash to do it," recalled Conrad. "I wanted it in the worst way." Rural electrification went slowly. Most Minnesota farms did not get electricity for another 10 to 15 years. Still, without the REA, getting electricity would have taken much longer. The New Deal pumped more than $1 billion into Minnesota between 1933 and 1939. It put people people to work, gave people hope, and propped up the economy. It also convinced many Minnesotans that government could and should play an active role in people's lives. Yet, even with all of these benefits, the New Deal did not end the Great Depression. Farm prices remained low, and millions of people were still out of work. It would take another world war to shake the United States and Minnesota out of its long economic nightmare. So World War II was really what got us out of the Great Depression. It was building everything that we needed for the war that got us out of that depression. That's what got everybody back to work and brought our economy back up. Now, if you missed it, the REA brought electricity to farms. So they helped farmers build little groups to come up with the money to bring electricity to the farms, and then they helped them make it affordable for them. Okay. One last section we have to read here, the Indian New Deal, and you're going to answer how it helped the Native Americans. In the 1930s, the federal government passed laws that changed life on American Indian reservations. In 1934, laws came to be known as the Indian New Deal. The main reform was called the Indian Reorganization Act. The IRA provided American Indian nations with the ability to control their own affairs more than they had for many years. It was intended to overturn previous U.S. government policies that interfered with sovereignty of American Indian nations. So we knew that they were supposed to be sovereign, but we also know that the United States government put in a lot of laws that kind of controlled them. So these laws were trying to give them back the power that they were supposed to have in the first place. The IRA ended the policy of allotment, which had reduced the amount of land American Indians owned on their reservations. It also enabled tribes to create independent tribal governments to serve their people. These were overseen by an agency called the Bureau of Indian Affairs. American Indian nations had to vote to adopt the new tribal government plan. The laws were not perfect. For example, it created government structure that ignored traditional Indian leadership. Still, it was a change, and some Native American Indian nations agreed to it. Another part of the Indian New Deal was the Johnson-O'Malley Act. This law dealt with education. The Johnson-O'Malley Act, or JOM, as it was called, came to be known, gave public schools money to cover the cost of educating American Indian students rather than providing separate schools for them. Although these reforms were not perfect, many American Indians believed they were steps in the right direction to improve over previous policies and laws. All right, so the Indian New Deal gave got rid of allotment and gave Native Americans back control of their reservation land. It also gave them the ability to set up their own tribal governments. And finally, it gave them money to set up their own schools. So, no more boarding schools, no more state run schools. Okay. All right. Well, I hope this helped you answer the questions from question number 13. We'll see you. Actually, this is the last teacher seminar for this unit. So answer questions 14 and 15 on your own. So we'll see you next unit. Bye.